to plan. And the other one was selling, or to actually regular groups. Groups meet every other week or like a 4-hour salary. Works expensive, but in that case, no, I can't do it. Yeah, so we need to John would be okay. It's like, either I've been in
Sometimes.
Guess we have some late arrivals, huh?
Yeah, Ellen is 16, she's running.
Rick, let me see.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Probably people can't find parking.
Yeah. It's parking.
It took me a while to get to town.
Patricia, it looks like you've joined. Can you hear us okay?
Yes. Yeah, I'm good.
Can you say that again?
There's something.
Patricia, can you try and speak again? Oh.
Who gets how much money?
Well,
Wow, I've almost pulled up this entire.
is that your order?
They're almost at the end.
You're a good steward. Scribbler. My writing is gone.
So is mine. Sometimes I can't, sometimes I literally can't read my own writing. What?
I'm working hard.
Maggie Miller.
I've never seen anything like it.
Is she an artist too? Like,
Yeah. I noticed that when she interviewed like years ago for us, and like she took these.
That's really what
It's a skill.
Yeah.
It's a skill.
I'm responsible now.
Yeah, yeah, she's finally coming back, but she's out of the Camden loop, so we fell in.
You know it's gonna be more.
Thank you.
They, it's only.
I came to like the idea. You can just watch live on YouTube. Like, yes, right. There are a couple of things either I would add or.
And if you go, but I would just cite it.
Yeah, that's fine. And I'm gonna come to a dead halt.
The last time I worked on
I'm really struggling with, well, I'm really important. That's like, yeah, no. So, oh, yeah. Has everybody know? And, we basically.
Tomorrow is the big meeting. Their first. Budget. And artists like people without that.
Okay. One, two,
Also,
three.
they're just really.
Ray.
So that's okay.
So I'm.
I put that in. Like,
There's still a few things to take.
Commentary.
Yeah. It was a good try.
Yeah.
But there were, I think, first phase.
Is that really?
No, I guess we should probably start Chris's there.
Yes.
I'm knowing her. It wouldn't have.
Maybe they didn't get that to the French room. Which is why I'm saying.
So we need to see how to do.
Should have work meeting for me.
No, we're missing.
Well, we're missing 3 more,
You don't look at Facebook.
and they're all expected, so. Traffic.
Yeah.
People are involved in some of the north, and it's Ray.
You push.
Oh, there is a
newspaper or the.
We messaged and here we are.
Quit your vacation, were you on vacation?
I got a order to flew in from New York.
Oh, wow.
I go to the airport.
Oh, you didn't want to come to this?
Yeah.
It's exactly what because it is.
Yeah. That's why we're saying.
All right, well, we need a couple more, but I think we should still get started, just in the interest of time and a busy agenda. Hello? Thank you for coming. I'll let you talk.
Oh, okay, sure.
Call to order.
I guess I will call to order. So I guess we can start with approval of the minutes. Does anybody have any edits for the minutes? No? Okay,
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
that was easy.
All those in favor?
Great, okay. And then the town manager update, Audrey, do you have anything?
Sure, so I think that, people had asked for a few grant updates on, related, grant programs and projects. So the, New England Forest and Rivers program, so we are still trying to figure out who's going to be the prime applicant and who's gonna support this, so it could end up being the town, or it could end up being a partner organization that applies for a, grant for a watershed management plan for the Megunticook watershed. So that program identified the Megunticook watershed to be a priority watershed for brook trout habitat. So either us or a partner organization is going to apply for that grant to do that plan. So we also received word from NIFWIF that we were not going to be invited to apply for the next round of the coastal resiliency program funding. And the feedback that we got was that it's really just due to timing and where we are in the cycle of this particular grant and how that could affect sort of the next round of funding, which would be more focused on actual construction. So because of, where we're at in the cycle of it, they are going to encourage us to apply for a future round. So
Do you know when that is?
it's typically in the summer that
Oh.
the actual application period, but I think it's around April or even March when they make the announcement. And if you're in a pipeline, if you have a pipeline project like us, that's when you have the opportunity to submit an
So
expression
it's
of interest.
yearly, it's not
Has
twice
been.
a year. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Are those the only two grant opportunities that we're looking at, or
There's another one, it just hasn't been announced, and
what's the organization?
it is NOAA.
No, okay.
What was the first organization that you said?
So the first one was also National Fish and Wildlife.
Oh, it was, okay.
okay, so let's move on to the bylaws and SB liaison update. Did everyone get the chance to look at the bylaw edits? Did anyone have any edits? I can just go quickly through. We removed the language on the SB liaison being the chairperson. We added that the liaison is chosen by the select board. We removed the vice chair language, and added that the project consultant will be facilitating or supporting facilitation of the meetings. Is there anything else? I noticed one that we
I
can
noticed
move.
that
Did you-
too.
Yeah, okay.
Shoot, right after I said.
That's, yeah. That's all I had. Anybody else?
A comma, a missing comma after consultant. The
Which-
chairperson shall, together with, and so forth, set the agenda for each meeting. It's a subordinate clause.
Oh, yeah. Good call.
Okay.
But the substance is okay? Or
Of course.
Of course. Okay,
I move that the bylaw, the changes be adopted.
A second?
all in favor? Okay. And, Chris, do you want to say anything about the SB liaison update? And the choice they made to
keep you on the committee and?
It's just, a simple update is in concert with the bylaw changes, so we're just going to have one person and, we'll certainly have to let Audra know if we're going to, have more than two select board people just happen to be here. You know, we decided, be more prudent, even though like if Ken or Allison or anybody else were here who was a select board member. As long as we're really not deliberating and making decisions is not as required, but it's a bit of a gray area. So, don't be surprised if the meetings say, oh, it's a select board meeting thing, because we just have requirements to go ahead and say, select board folks are there, but the role of select board people being here is because of their interest, not because of voting sway. I mean, they're a member of the public too, and so able to make comment when that's available. And that's the only thing I didn't see that was missing. I think when I went through the bylaws, as far as what things should be removed, I think there was a section in there that disallowed public comment in the bylaws. And I was thinking that we better to allow.
Oh, I thought we changed that, but yeah, I will make that edit.
You know, am I remembering it correctly? It's something to that effect.
Yeah, we voted on, or they voted on,
Modifying
adding,
bylaws, but
modifying them.
it may not have been incorporated.
I don't
Were they in the
think it was.
bylaws?
No,
I
I don't
don't-
think so.
No, that section wasn't in the
Okay.
sections that were being distributed. It was in the
Yeah.
original one that I posed as a recommendation. But I don't know if it was an error or intent not to have it in there.
Can I ask if, select board members are in the audience here, are they able to contribute to the conversation if they have something that is pertinent to?
Unfortunately,
discuss?
it's during the public comment
Only during the-
piece
okay.
is where that would be most relevant.
Okay.
We have to be careful that we only want to be here to, the point of the liaison is to ensure that the committees that's been assigned and created are staying within the scope of what was originally determined that we need to go ahead and do. That's the major piece. And then if other select board members happen to be here, there might be questions that you might have if somebody's done some research. I mean, we can answer questions, that's fair, but we should not be trying to sway an agenda, sway a decision, that sort of thing, beyond. Are we staying within the scope of what was assigned? And, is there something that we determined as a select board that would be important for the group to know? Well, that would be good to know, both ways. And so that I'm also able to then report effectively, is the intent on, during the board update times, what things are going on in relationship to the scope of the committee. And really being, that's really kind of our guideline, to try to stay within. Not to influence, but to be aware and to stay within the scope. That's the intent.
Along these lines, I was also gonna ask about meeting minutes moving forward. So there's a group called Civic Sunlight that has been doing AI generated meeting minutes for a few meetings. And they sent me some from the last one and they were really straightforward and really easy and it took us no time, which was nice. So I'll send you what they send after this one. And if you guys think that's appropriate and acceptable, then I would.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest the same, because I signed up for their newsletters for campus
Yeah.
support, and they definitely have a little bit of technical stuff that they're working on, which they're pretty transparent about, but it seems like it's a nice way to be able to.
I think we would still probably put in
Yeah.
a little bit of time to just give a little more context to a few items, but, I think that's a direction.
No, I
would
was,
like
yeah, I
to
was
go.
interested in it as a way to maybe help, present what we're doing to the public in a different way, because it seems like the ones I've gotten so far for,
Snippets.
yeah, it's like really quick, like in newsletter form with a breakdown of what's happening in the meeting. And to me, it seems like a super easy way to sign up for that newsletter and get, like, I learned more about the Rockport town meeting than I have ever in 2 minutes, so it was awesome, I think.
Perfect, thanks. I'll send you guys those after this meeting.
Anything else on? So let's move on to the outreach to date, updates and next steps. Did you want to start off?
Yeah, so Lauren and I are compiling sort of all the notes of the outreach to date, not just these interviews happened, or this many speaker series, just like a real summary of who we've talked to, what we've talked about, including, you know, building on our conversations. And so that's, you'll see that by the end of next week at the latest, just to help summarize and understand who has talked to who and when, and what the intent and outcomes of those conversations were. And along those same lines, we're going to do these building assessments for the landowners that have agreed to it on Main Street in August. And so between now and then, Jeremy's actually helping set up the meetings with those landowners. And so as soon as we get a schedule, I'll send it out to you all and see who's willing and able to attend those meetings moving forward. Whether it's one or many of you, hopefully not all 9, because I kind of gotta be that might be a lot, but maybe it would be great and it'd be helpful for all of us to hear. So once I get that schedule more refined, I will send it to you all. And then real quick, and then bigger outreach in terms of how we're doing, the design discussions and anything after that. I would love to talk about that either if we have time at the end of this meeting, or as I sent that meeting poll to continue the conversation either today, tomorrow, or Friday. So lots to come on that. I think we have some really good ideas of some neighborhood socials and some ways to have some functional conversations with more and more people. But yeah, go ahead.
The building assessments, is that mostly structural? Is it functional?
Structural.
And where does your building assessment or our building assessments, is there opportunity to play off of what DOT's done or is doing? It seems silly to go and do a structural building assessment because I imagine DOT's either already done or is doing building assessments from a structural standpoint for all of these structures as well.
They're not.
Okay, or
so
not
they-
yet.
No, they're not. There's a few buildings that, they've had to do like a survey to figure out which are attached to the bridge and which aren't.
Okay,
And the ones that are attached to the bridge, they're telling them that they need to hire their own structural engineer to figure out how to detach from the bridge and still be stable.
but there, as far as you know, the DOT is not doing a structural baseline for all the buildings?
No.
Do you want to provide any more context on this?
Yeah, I get in this.
Can you turn on the mics?
We don't, so with the owl, you don't actually, like, it's kind of but
Never
we
mind.
can if it's helpful. Sorry.
What was that?
He wanted to turn on the mics, but
You
we're,
don't need it, that's good.
okay.
Yeah, so the supplemental building assessment is, following up, there was an assessment done in 2018. And which identified some potential risk factors, and so the whole intent here is to follow up that study and turn as many unknowns into knowns. So that we can more, and then also identifying potential mitigations associated with each of the project options. So that we can have a more crisp idea of what potential costs might come for the buildings.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Do we have a date yet for the public meeting?
No, we'll
Or
talk about that
ideas?
either
Okay.
with View Shed, because they'll be the ones that are putting it on, so they'll be here shortly as well.
Oh, really? They're
Yeah, they're gonna present their designs.
Oh, yes, that part, right.
In terms of outreach, it was a really nice letter from Lincolnville.
Yeah,
And I'm wondering how and when, or how we're gonna plug that into this outreach. or
yeah, I
involve them.
think that's a great question and something, we reached out to them a while ago, and so I was happy, I think we're all circling back, which is great. And so I don't have a specific way that I was going to reach out, but definitely going to respond if you guys want, if any of you want to take on that.
I just thought it might be worth a short discussion within the group when there's time.
Yeah, we can talk about it now. We have time right now. If you wanna. If you have any ideas, or we can talk about it tomorrow, or like in our outreach conversation.
Right, well, they seem eager to meet with some or all of us.
Yeah.
To be involved in the discussions, if not the decisions.
Yeah.
And so one easy, first simple idea would be to try to create a meeting for some of us anyway, and some of them, and find out what their interests and ideas are.
Yeah.
Just exploratory.
Sounds great. One thing that you and a few others have asked for as well is maybe some more meetings. So whether we meet every 2 weeks for a couple months while we get through this phase, and so maybe in 2 weeks we can meet with them, and that can be part of that meeting. So that's something that we should talk about.
Do you want to talk about that now?
Sure. Do you guys want to meet every 2 weeks?
And so it came up in the context of the recommendations, and we only have about 7.5 weeks to go until we have to make those recommendations, which isn't a lot. We only have one meeting in between. And as we've learned, we have tons to talk about during the meeting, and we're not gonna get through all the recommendations. And it's gonna be a heavy lift, I think. So do we want to create a workshop setting that's 3 to 4 hours, or do we want to meet every other Wednesday or whatever that day might be? What
Yeah,
are
I
people
definitely think we need
thinking?
to increase our meetings to get the work done.
I agree with that.
I agree with that too.
What would people prefer? Like a chunk of time, 3, 4 hours one day, or maybe 2 hours every other?
Well, it depends a
Wednesday.
little bit on what we're doing in those meetings. So like if we're meeting with, Lincolnville and different stakeholders or whatever, those are gonna be shorter, I would think. So
Yeah, that's good.
Maybe we
We should
need to
talk
line up
about
what we're
what are we
doing.
doing in the meetings? Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's possible that one where we're really like working on wording and recommendation might be one that's multiple hours to really.
Yeah, workshop.
Hammer out
Okay.
everything in one setting, but,
yeah,
and that might be at the end of August.
right, that might be, but I do think more frequent up to that point makes sense.
Yeah.
yeah. And it's my understanding that FB is working on creating some kind of draft, and then so we can put in our information once we have it, which so it'll be fast and ready to go, but I think that will help also us understand how to discuss what we want in the recommendations.
Mhm.
So we'll have like an outline for us
Yeah, I
already.
mean, judging on past discussions, I would think we might take a while deliberating on.
Yeah, we might get stuck with something, I think it's gonna be heavy lift, as I said. So people think like a workshop, 3 to 4 hours, 4 hours, what do we think?
We're talking about the one in August? Like before the recommendation?
Yeah, it'd probably be what, end of August or mid-August probably? We need maybe like 2 weeks before the deadline to write it.
What's our deadline again, Audra?
September 1st.
September
third,
3rd.
okay.
So mid-August.
Yeah. So yeah, mid-August might be, but it needs to be after the public meeting is the thing, so
So maybe
it'd be
we
great if
can-
we could figure out the timeline.
Yeah. Maybe we'll see how tonight goes with View Shed and what they present us, and that will help us understand if we're ready for a public engagement or a public session soon, if you guys like what you see. And that will dictate sort of the timeline, but I think maybe we'll have a meeting in a couple weeks with Lincolnville, and then we'll have another meeting 2 weeks later, where that could be either a planning meeting for the public session or other things that we want to catch up on. And then we have our, this meeting, and that can be, we can extend it either 2 hours earlier, 2 hours later, and that can be a working session. But those are some ideas, and I can send out some draft ideas of a schedule, but that could be one way to approach it.
And what's good for people, weekends versus weekdays, people have jobs, what are we thinking?
Weekdays are easier for me personally.
So like a 4 to 8.
Yeah, I mean, no. I don't know what's ideal, but yeah, my husband will be away for work for the next good portion of the next month, so I think it'll be easier for me to.
Yeah, during school hours,
Yeah, get care during weekend and weekends.
So during, yeah.
Well, 4 to 8 is a good time. People can do that. That works.
4 to 8?
Is that what you said? 4 to 8?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many late night meetings have you been to for us?
Way too many. Wait, you saying
Great
8 is
dinner.
late? Oh,
Yes, for
no,
some of us
no,
it is.
yeah. 11 is late for me.
It's tricky with people having 9 to 5 jobs, and I don't know what people's hours are, but weekends are probably harder.
I'm being a teacher right now and wide open, so I'm letting other people take.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Ray, any thoughts?
It really depends on what day of the week and what the day is. I think some of it's already have been scheduled, commitments, families.
It is summer.
Yeah,
I know, this is
for
the
summer
worst time to
visitors
have
or
this.
travel, so.
Yeah. But you're okay with like a 4 to 8 timeframe or?
Sure, we serve for food.
Okay.
Yeah, we definitely.
3 to 7?
We'll get some pizza.
Easy filling.
Okay, so,
Should we look at penciling in? I mean,
yeah, it might be smart.
I look at like our Wednesdays. I mean, should we look at trying to maintain that same cadence and look at every 2 weeks on Wednesday and then we may have to make some longer?
Wednesdays are okay with me so far. As far as I know, yeah.
The 24th. So do we want to do 2 of these sessions?
Well, let's schedule them.
Because the first one, we could focus, the first one on the, if it's on the 24th, will be before the public meeting, so in that one, we could discuss the other dams and then maybe the holistic picture. And then the second one in, I guess that'd be mid-August, or
One thing that we could also do
We
on the
could do
24th is
every
talk
day.
about the outline, because we have an outline and
Right.
review that and make sure we all, who wants to fill in what gaps and how.
What's the outline for?
Like an outline of the recommendation. So what should
Oh,
the
okay.
recommendation be and what's the report that supplements that recommendation?
Okay.
So I think if you guys provide a recommendation, it would be kind and nice to have some information of why you made that recommendation.
Yeah, okay,
Or
yeah,
the different.
background,
Yeah.
what we've done so far.
okay.
Um, okay, so that would be let's start with the
Dates.
24th. Does that work for everyone? The
July
20
24th. and then
Yeah.
into August, what's the first one? in
So
August?
that would be,
Okay.
Next
well,
one,
so we have a meeting on the 14th, so I guess the 28th,
We're talking about July 24th.
Oh,
the August 28th, would that work?
Yeah.
From 4 to 8?
okay, gotcha.
Probably.
So before
Okay.
you start, I just brought up the timeline to be certain, so, September 3rd is when the select board would actually vote on the warrant. So you'd want the August 20th meeting to have the language for the article and then the recommendation in front of them, so that, that's more of a discussion and somebody can come to them with that
There's
recommendation.
a select board meeting on the 20th, that's what you're saying? So we
Yes.
would have to have it by then.
On what?
August 20th?
August 20th.
Holy smokes.
August
We
20th.
have to have it by the 20th.
Yes.
And that would be a presentation by the MERCAC to the select board as part of that,
On the 20th,
on
yeah.
the 20th.
Okay,
Could you guys do August 13th as another date?
We have our meeting on the 14th,
I know, but
so
I was gonna see if we
But
can
yeah.
move our meeting to the 13th, because I'm out on the 14th.
Or the
But you guys can meet with
what
them.
about the 7th? We go a week before that, maybe?
Yeah.
Or, but is that in time?
But I was thinking we
when's the
could do
public
one on the
meeting?
7th and then another one on the 13th, just like back to back, to then be prepared for the 20th.
So that means
Gives us 3 meetings before the report has to go in.
Yeah.
That's not a lot.
Is there any
Correct.
chance
That's why
to
we're-
have a separate meeting, like an hour-long meeting with the select board? Just like the last week in August?
You could ask them.
That's
Yeah.
a potential.
Another issue is the public meeting has to be before our last recommendations workshop. And that means it have to be in July, if it's, the quarter of the first week of August.
All right, let's see how tonight goes, and this will be the main part of the conversation that we have for our public outreach, planning. Later today or tomorrow or Friday.
So maybe pencil in the 24th
24th
now,
for now.
and maybe the 7th as well, or do we wanna? Okay.
Yeah, 24th and 7th.
Yeah, I did the 24th.
What happened to the 13th or 14th?
Oh, you're right, okay.
Is that
That's
out?
when our normal meeting is anyway, so we'll keep that, but.
Okay, so there are 3 meetings then before the 20th.
And hopefully one of them will be at least 4 hours, so. We'll have an extended one, we'll have more meetings and a big one.
And sometime before the 7th meeting,
And we'll meet
7th
tomorrow.
on August is going to be the public meeting.
That's what we'll talk about today with View Shed team.
No, the August 7th meeting is the
She's saying, well,
workshop
that's
as well. Oh,
She's asking, no, but when will the public meeting be? We don't know that.
Late.
oh, I misunderstood.
Right.
I thought you
The
said
seventh
the
is the
seventh.
4-hour meeting? That's
Yeah, that's one of our workshops.
Let's just take a deep breath.
We're
You're-
gone for 2
You're
weeks.
gone? Okay, that's good to know. So the seventh doesn't work for you either.
Seventh or the
Doesn't work.
14th.
I mean, I can definitely zoom in for, if we're doing a meeting on the seventh.
We're on the boat.
It's probably too soon anyway, because the public meeting might be afterwards, so
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe we should figure out another time.
Well, it sounds like maybe we need to nail down when the public meeting is.
Exactly. Let's
Yeah.
do that and then we'll send out a bunch of polls and we'll figure it out and we'll make it work.
Okay,
We always do.
we do it.
All right.
So where are we? Is there anything else that people want to bring up with the recommendations? One thing I was thinking is might want to do outreach after the recommendations as well. So how do we want to deliver our recommendations to the public? Via Facebook, websites, we want to send out a mailing, like, is there anything?
So, Tom Cochran, who does Civic Sunlight, I talked to him about that a few months ago. And that's kind of his realm of work, and he offered that if there was a way that he can help with that.
Oh,
We should tap into him, so, I don't know exactly what that looks like, but it's potentially a resource on somebody who knows how to do that kind of marketing, so.
Okay, is it something that we could access a list of townspeople, emails, and,
Yeah, we have a, email list or
yeah,
of
so you can
people
do
who
that.
we send like, agendas to and that sort of thing.
Okay,
Yeah.
is that something that everyone wants to do? We can,
Yeah, I mean, I think we need
That's
to,
value added.
yeah.
yeah, we can send out a newsletter, of course, to our list too as well. Okay. Anything else on that topic and the recommendations? Okay, I think we're ready for you, Chef. Yeah,
Before.
good timing.
Before Viewshed gets started, I did want to introduce someone who's on the call, Patricia O'Donnell. She is joining the meeting today from her office in Vermont. She's from Heritage Landscape, which is her firm. She authored the Camden Library Grounds, Camden Amphitheater and Harbor Park Historic Landscape Preservation Treatment Plan from 1997. With Charles Beveridge, who's an Olmsted scholar, providing an essay. The firm, known then as Landscapes, went on to aid in Harbor Park implementation negotiations, planning and construction supervision completed in 2004. The town of Camden reached out to her for assistance in Harbor Park preservation guidance on this project. And we've had a few meetings as a project team, and thanks for being here today, Patricia. And now I will pass, unless you want to say anything. All right, now I will pass the mic over to Eamon. Yep.
There you go. It's good to see you all. It's been a month. We've been busy. That was a great meeting we had the last time we were here. Pulling together since then a set of 3 design scenarios that we talked about last time for like 2 hours. So what you'll see today is the culmination of that month of work. We brought together engineering, landscape architecture, historic preservation.
Hold on, let me mouse for a second.
Yeah. Quickly, as we've only had a month, but I think we've got some really good options for you to respond to today. I think at the top, I want to say, don't take them as cast in stone. We've done our best to reflect everything you've asked for, but today should be a chance to look at them, digest them, ask questions, tell us what should evolve or change. So this is a snapshot of where we're at, and we can continue to evolve these before going to the public. And we probably should, since it's the first time this year. So your input today is very important, just like it was last time. And thank you again for all the clear guidance you gave us. It made this that much more streamlined. So I'm going to Control L, please.
Can I keep it bigger now?
That should go full screen.
Oh. Ta-da. Thank you.
All right,
So our agenda, we'll look at the design scenarios, that's most of what we're doing, get your feedback, and then we'll do a brief touch on the public meeting at the end, but I know we're working on setting the time to talk about that. This is the schedule we reviewed last time. Here we are in early July. It's hard to believe we're halfway through summer. We've got the public meeting coming up in early August. So this is an important moment to get your feedback so that we can progress designs to a place where you're ready for the public to give their input. So as promised, today we have three options, scenarios rather. Scenario A is full dam reconstruction. In this group, we've called it status quo. We've called it no change. We know that it means keeping the dam at its current elevation, but that requires really rebuilding the dam to do that. So we also think of that as our kind of control in this experiment, so we understand, and so the town understands what it would cost to reconstruct what you already have, to have that as a comparison for other options, so you can see apples to apples. Scenario B is partial dam reconstruction. I think you might be thinking of that as the one where we lower the impoundment level. And scenario C is full dam removal. Last time, you were all very helpful, very clear and instructive on 4 parameters for each of those designs. How much impoundment, what should the type of fish passage be, what should the aesthetic of the cascade be, and how should we think about Harbor Park? And today we're glad we can report back with some metrics to help you with your decision-making and just with the conversation. We have numbers for cost, habitat connectivity, and resilience. Those are the metrics that we agreed on as very important for you all to make this decision. All right. Assuming that's clear, also interrupt me with questions, comments, anything you need. Scenario A, our status quo. These are the parameters you gave us last time, that in this scheme, we will reconstruct all dam infrastructure in kind. That would include restoring the cascade aesthetic to a uniform flow over a weir edge. It's a little toothy right now because of the condition of the dam, so getting that back to be a uniform flow. There's an asterisk saying, in a very dry time of year, water flow gets very low. It can't be uniform. It's just a really wide waterfall. So I think we all understand that's going to be, there's a point at which there's just not enough water coming down the river for a uniform flow. But to the extent we can, this scheme makes that weir perfectly flat so it flows over.
Would you entertain a question at this point? I don't know if you,
No, sorry, just for the comments.
I advanced too quickly. Okay, here we go. And then no changes to Harbor Park or the associated seawall are in this. Now, just because you probably wanted to know, we have included a cost if you were to take this scenario, but elevate the seawall, we can tell you what that would be.
No changes is not necessary. I mean, it assumes that, the seawall is reconstructed, but within its existing footprint.
So this is the space from above. You can see the edge of Harbor Park. You can see the grounding basin. This is where the cascade begins going up over the ledge. You have the weir edge here, the seawall here and wrapping around. The buildings on Main Street all backing onto that. We have a south cascade as well as the eastbound cascade. And in a reconstructed condition where we do get that uniform waterfall condition, water would spill to the east and to the south. So you have less of a divided set of cascades like today. They still split at some point, making their way down the rocks, but more cohesive up at the top. Just to give you your bearings, because this will be the same in the rest of the drawings. This water line is mean sea level. So this isn't sea level rise. It's not high tide or low tide. It's the mean sea level somewhere in between. The water flow coming down the river, we're showing generally as average May flow. So one thing we talked about that's not in this presentation, but I think should be for the public, is just play out many scenarios. High water during a storm, very low water during August drought, sea level rise, major storms causing surges, all of that. But for today, we kind of have across all of the schemes, mid-tide, spring-ish river flow. So they're apples to apples in that way.
What are the optional seawall resilience improvements?
Yeah, so that's where I'm mentioning, this as our status quo keeps the wall down at 6'5". We have included costs if you want to know what it costs to go up to 11, so.
Of the seawall,
Seawall.
okay.
Yeah,
And the impoundment stays the same thing.
impoundment stays the same up at 24.5.
Mhm.
So this is really trying to rebuild what you have in kind, with that one exception, just because we thought you might ask what it'll cost to go up to 11 with the seawall.
Right.
Do you know where the mean tide will be in 50 and 100 years?
Using the state projections, we can chart that out for you,
Okay.
we have all of that.
I think
But
that would be helpful if you're talking about raising the seawall 11 feet, just to see where that.
so let me dive into that a bit. So this means to elevation 11, not
That's
an
right, yeah,
additional
right, no,
11
I
feet.
understand it.
And that we've done across all these where we go up to 11, and that's a 4-foot rise
Mhm.
generally from
Yep.
about 7 to about 11, which is anticipating the mid-tier 2,100 state projection of 3.9 feet. So
Okay.
gives you a sense of kind of why we're hitting that 4-foot mark. You know, we could get into sea level rise projections. There's a lot of range in there of what might happen, but the state kind of mid-level projection is 3.9 feet by 2,100. So that's
Okay.
what we worked off here.
So Amy, can you add that slide to the presentation to
Absolutely.
show that? Okay,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
I could also just, to add to what Eamon was saying, the present top of the seawall is at about 11, elevation 7, which is, you know, a tide level that's, in the absence of other storm conditions, is about once a month or once every other month.
Right.
You know, and so, think about that into the future, you know, mid 2100. Essentially, that's sort of what's being perpetuated forward. There's a whole range of other assumptions that could be made, but that's where 11 comes from.
Right, so it's just basically adding the 3.5 feet of projected sea level rise to it. Okay.
Right.
I got a question, Audrey and Chris, you guys probably answer this, but the commitment to the voters with regard to this vote, it probably doesn't include the seawall, it's more associated with the dam element, is that correct? I would hate with a limited amount of time to get distracted by seawall discussions for the same reason we're not distracted by other hydraulic things up the river. And maybe it's better to focus on. We parse these together just because they're kind of near each other, but it seems like some of the solutions don't necessarily rely on one another.
They don't necessarily, you're right, and it's been on our mind too. I think the committee, the town needs to think hard about that. Is this a question or ultimately a vote about the dam? In some scenarios, you have to talk about Harbor Park in a dam future, like a dam removal.
Mhm.
Do you want to leave it at that and say, we'll deal with the park when we deal with the park? Or, and I think this was the direction we got last time, let's keep talking about the seawall, at least within this group and in this meeting, because it's so closely tied. But I do think that's something for the committee to really consider, is how to put it forward to the community. Do they want to think about it all as one big project, or should they be split?
Yeah, and I think it kind of comes around to like being able to compare options, like, you know, the action option, you can't ignore the seawall. Both of them implicate that. And so it's a matter of like, are you considering talking about the seawall there, but not, you know, talking about it? So I think that's all, you know, for you folks to decide, but I think it is worth acknowledging that the action options do both impact the seawall.
I think the obvious thing is that seawall is gonna be raised up to 11 feet. No matter what happens with Montgomery Dam or the river, where, no? I mean, there's fun.
So it'll depend on which option. And they're all and they are connected to some extent, so you do have to look at them together, but it'll depend on which option you recommend as to what you're gonna be recommending for the seawall as well. And it could very well be whichever option you pick in terms of the, how you go forward with the dam. You don't have to do anything about the seawall, but it could be that whatever option you recommend has such a significant impact on the seawall that you do need to address it in some way. Even if it's just to say, you know, we know more design work needs to be done to, you know, come up with the details for how we're gonna handle it. So I think it's really gonna depend on which direction you go in as to how you address the seawall.
Okay,
But wouldn't it still be, I mean, even if you're doing status quo and it's then, you know, maybe the seawall is not on our plate. But it seems like the town would still have to be dealing with seawall either way, so it's still,
Yes.
it may be not married to this project, but it would still be.
Well,
the town is
that's why-
dealing
And I would say like the question was just about the vote.
Right, yeah.
So I think that it's all part of this project, like, you know, there's funding allocated to address the seawall question, so. You know, that's gonna move forward and you're gonna make a recommendation, or we're going to ask you to make a recommendation on that regardless of whether it's part of, you know, the vote in November, or if it's part of like the later stages of the project where you're making broader recommendations on other parts of the watershed.
So, yeah,
Yeah, I think it should be more of a side note, but it's an important side note. I agree, we don't wanna get too focused on it, but it should be brought up, and I liked your explanation, Audrey, I think maybe you could explain that to the public, just make them understand that they are connected, but not necessarily
Yeah.
in this.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I can do that as I go tonight. That might help.
Yeah.
I think once we look back on this in 45 minutes,
sure.
it'll be real clear.
Yes.
Hopefully, if
Let's
I've
keep
done
it
my job. So, in this scheme, just to put a bow on that, you rebuild the dam and you could leave the seawall as is falling apart low down in the ocean. You could rebuild it in kinds, keep it at 6 or 7 feet, and you would not be changing the character of the park, you wouldn't be filling, but you would leave yourself open for this future flooding. And it sort of begs the question, you're gonna come in and rebuild this low wall, maybe you wanna raise it up while you're at it? I think that's at the crux of this question. So this is what it will look like, you recognize it. This is what you have today. Zooming in, you see the rear edge would be consistent, waterfall coming through here, it would be rebuilding this wall if you chose to do that. We haven't shown, this is an existing photo, so we haven't rendered raising that. So one of our discussion points today could be if that's what we want to do. So this is at the existing 6 or 7 foot elevation. When we look at costs, apologies, this is kind of small. The capital cost for rebuilding this dam is
2.8 million.
I believe the base level was 2.6. 2.2, my apologies. So to rebuild the dam, fix it up, 2.2 million.
Which includes, replacing the seawall in its present.
Right, so fixing the wall. So fixing the wall and fixing the dam, $2.2 million. And then over the course of, it's 50 years. Like,
Yeah.
50 years of maintaining that will be an additional 1.8 million. That's spending the money you need to spend every year for 50 years to keep it in good working order. Periodic repairs, maintenance. It goes up to 2.8 if you do want to elevate Harbor Park's edge up to 11, so that's the cost of additional higher walls, more fill. That's the difference of $0.6 million, $600,000.
600,000 to raise it.
So
Yeah.
how much is it without putting the
And
wall to the
not
level?
touching the wall
Yeah.
itself,
Because
yeah,
that might get funding through FEMA, et cetera.
yeah, so I can.
That might be more important, I think, to
I can calculate this a little bit on the fly, but I would say it's roughly about 40% of the cost was seawall and about 60%.
Okay, it's a lot less. That's good to know, because I think, you know, in this context, we want to know how much of the, you know, taxpayers going to be paying versus what could be paid through the grant. seawalls and things like that. Right,
Sure,
I
yeah,
think that's key
yeah.
to split those.
We should divide that here, you divide dam from wall.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and especially if it's 40, is that, and maybe make that a little bigger.
yeah, make it bigger for
I need my
sure.
copies.
2.2 million.
So if 2.2 is the dam and the seawall combined, Mike is telling me about half or just under half of that is the wall and just over half of that is the dam.
For the citizens of the town, are you gonna be able to give us, I know we're not looking at the other dams that the town owns,
Mhm.
but what the annual or the 50-year maintenance fee will be for East, West, and Seabright also, which the town owns? I think it would be a good comparison to show how much Montgomery Dam costs versus those three dams.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that's included, you know, those life cycle costs are included in all of them.
Yeah, so I think it'd be helpful to give that information to the citizens.
What's your thought? How would that help someone's decision on the Montgomery Dam?
Well, you take a look at 1.8 million, they're gonna say, wow, that's a very high price, but we may be paying more, or projected to pay more for the other three dams too. I think it'd be good.
Well, and what are we paying currently to maintain these dams?
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
maybe in today's dollars, what are we paying currently to maintain Montgomery?
Yeah, I
Dam?
mean, I can tell you based on $2024, our assumption, in this cost analysis, is about $10,000 a year.
Okay,
I'm sorry, you didn't hear you, what did you say?
$10,000 a year
for,
just operation and maintenance of the
Of
site.
the Montgomery.
Yeah. And then we also include, periodic repairs every 10 years.
okay, I was gonna say, like, they regrouted and replaced the
Yeah.
gate, so obviously that must be amortized over years.
Yeah, and, we informed this, Audra shared the cost cataloging of the last 30 years or so, and on average, it's, somewhere between $10,000 and $13,000 a year, on average over that period in $2024. But we assumed that, however, we assumed that since it was gonna be all new structures, it wouldn't be quite that expensive. But so we had a periodic cost every 10 years of $50,000. So that's, whereas the actual cost for repairs has been $10,000 to $13,000. We instead assumed about $5,000 on average.
And do you feel that it's totally necessary to rebuild the wall?
The seawall.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's assumptions that need to be made, but, you know, I can just, the wall, more or less from the corner as you come around through the intertidal area and then wrapping around, it all has very poor condition. And, you know, and certainly if you're gonna think about elevating the wall at all, you have to start over.
Well, I know that the one from the corner to the right of the grounding ramp is in terrible shape. That's been rebuilt. But I'm wondering about the other one, whether that is more
Yes,
stable and you could add to it.
I can tell you that the assumption that was made in the cost analysis is basically from about this corner here is being rebuilt. This run from here up to the sluice way, is more reconditioning.
Okay,
And then, this, really to the other side of the gate, was, you know, the existing concrete spillway, was assumed to be demolished and rebuilt. And looking at the structure of the dam, the concrete actually carries through and beneath, the masonry parts. But the other assumption is that the gate, structure would be updated with some new mechanics, for just slight improvement of functioning of the gate and things like that. And so, under the refurbishment, scenario, basically, we would be rebuilding, you know, completely up to the other side of the gate. And then, you know, salvaging and replacing the masonry overlays. And then from there around the corner, it's more of a reconditioning of the masonry, with the exception of, for the leakage through the structure, we assumed putting a concrete overlay on the inside of the dam to stop the leakage.
and does that include any remediation of anything that you may find in the holding pond that perhaps is a contaminant? Or does it include anything of any of the underpinnings of any of the buildings, doing anything to any of those?
Yeah, so it includes, the sediment.
Okay.
Removing the sediment. It doesn't include any assumptions related to the buildings, and none of these costs tonight. I'll just preface that, in the alternatives that you're seeing, none of the costs assume, associated building upgrades.
Okay,
At the present juncture, very difficult to say what already needs to be done versus what needs to be done as part of any of these projects, and so we just have not. Sometimes when you make big assumptions and include costs like that, it obscures.
well, you haven't done a structural evaluation yet.
And then I think the other thing I'll just preface as well, because it's a good time to bring it up. The upcoming options that Amy's gonna show are gonna show a lot of park enhancements, bridges, path redirections and things like that. A lot of that is very dependent on, the input of the stakeholders, and also is very scalable. And so for the present analysis, we have also not included costs for new paths and things like that. Basically, the present costs that you're gonna see today are dealing with the dam and basically the overall footprint, the wall around Harbor Park and things like that.
Great. Thank you.
Just real quick, would it be helpful to have a slide that can bullet points all of those things you just mentioned tonight?
Assumptions, sure.
And what's part of the rehabilitation or whatever you want to call it?
Sure.
And what's not too.
Yeah.
Good call.
If you have to do this much rebuilding of the dam, you might not know the answer to this question, but do you have an idea of how much, like what percentage would actually still be old historic dam versus new pieces?
I think that, so the existing dam structure is kind of a mixture, like although it looks like masonry elements, there's really like horizontal layers of successive pours of concrete that, like, I got some pictures from just recently looking at the back side of the dam, and really the masonry components are really just superficial. They don't really, there's probably a deep masonry part in portions of the dam that's covered over with concrete. But essentially you'd be rebuilt, it would be a new structure within the lines and grades of the existing structure, which for the most part was updated in 1930, but then was again updated in the early 90s as well at that time. So the 1800s era dam, there's probably still some elements of that in there somewhere, but it's a real kind of mixed bag of various constructions since that time. But with the refurbishment, you're saying, okay, this is the shape and whatnot is important, but we're gonna modernize it for the next, 75 years or something.
I was gonna say, there are drawings though that are very specific as to the size of the blocks on the side of that dam that Olmsted specified. So would you reuse those blocks or not?
Yeah, so for the areas, like for example, the areas,
On that north side that faces Harbor Park?
this part over here, so from here over, the dam would just be left the way it is right now, and the repair was instead of concrete overlay under the water on the inside of the dam.
Mhm.
But for the portions around like the gate structure and whatnot, the assumption would be that those masonry pieces would be taken away and preserved, marked and, in their order and whatnot,
Okay.
put back.
Great, thank you.
So the area that's shaded out there under the 2.8, that was sort of the seawall update, is that correct? Okay. And if you-
For the
Raising of the seawall, yeah. And if you did the raising of the seawall, you would look to pull a somewhat flush elevation back to existing grade.
Yeah, and we looked a lot at that. I
And
had
then-
more Harbor Park grades in my head than I can imagine, so I can tell you right where the grade was.
And how would you address the grounding ramp
Yeah.
structure? Would that go away as part of that?
You'll see in the next couple options,
Thank you.
some creative ways to do it. And this one, if the aspiration was to keep it, looking as much like the existing as possible, I think the next scheme probably does the best, but if you kept it in the same footprint, obviously it would get steeper. So it maybe consider stretching it, or you'll see in the next scheme that's a little more ambitious, we've stepped it.
Okay.
Just in the interest of time, I know it's important, but yeah.
Scenario B. Yeah, so that was our baseline. So scenario B, this is partial dam reconstruction. This is the kind of middle path that tries to compromise and meet a lot of different potential criteria. We had a great presentation last time from Mr. Grassi, and this looks most like, I think, the design that he shared then. So this lowers the impoundment by 4 feet, modifies the bedrock to sustain the cascade to the south. This will all make sense when you see it on plan. It creates a uniform flow over a level weir edge. And in this case, we're beginning to adapt Harbor Park more significantly. So with Harbor Park, we've got 4 things going on. We're introducing a pool and weir, technical fishway. We're elevating the park to reduce marine flooding. We're improving seawall resilience and public access to the waterfront. And where suitable, introducing living shoreline strategies. On that last one, I think that's where we still have more work to do. It's tricky working with the vertical seawall and a site like this to get a true living shoreline. So probably more to be thought of there, just full disclosure. All right, so, yeah.
I apologize if you've already defined this in the first hour that I missed. Can you go back just with that term?
Which one?
What is a living shoreline?
Yeah, it is a term that my engineer and environmental scientist friends would know a lot more about than I do, but I think for this conversation, a living shoreline is an attempt to stabilize a shoreline without just using hard engineering and concrete, but to sort of evoke or mimic natural systems like dunes or other natural shorelines that have plant roots holding the soil in place. Now, doing that has certain requirements. You can only achieve a certain slope. If you get too steep, plant roots just aren't going to do the job. So there's a certain gradient at which a really planted strategy works. As you get steeper, you start introducing more stone and other elements. As you get very steep, if that's what you need because you have a working waterfront or something like that, you're really looking at hard engineered edges. So living shoreline is kind of part of a bigger conversation about how can we get away from hardening our coast and try to get back to something that's more nature-like. Is that fair?
It's great.
Ooh, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the aspiration here was to look for opportunities for that. It's tricky. So I don't think we have the best in here yet for that piece. So there's a lot going on in this plan. If you squint, just for beginners, just to begin, you'll see we still have a weir edge, an impoundment, a pool here at the top of the dam. We have the current alignment of the seawall still legible here. We'll get to what's going on down at the east. Some new things, we're seeing a pool and weir technical fishway coming down, hugging that seawall, doubling back to keep dropping down, coming through the seawall and out into the water. That's our fish passage. You'll see with these spot grades, 20.5 for the weir edge. So the top of the dam is 20.5. Today it's at 24.5. So this is coming down 4 feet. What you're seeing over the top is one of these public amenities that Mike mentioned that's not in the budget, but something we're putting out there as an idea, a pedestrian connection over the top of the impoundment, linking you out to the ledge and a trail eventually to another bridge, linking you to the landing to the south here. You have the path coming down through the park. It's the existing path with the stairs. When you get to about here where this dashed blue line is, that's where you encounter contour 11. To the question about, where would we be filling to? All of this area inside that dashed blue line has been raised up to 11. The part of the park outside of that stays as it is today. That's 12, 13, 14, 15, going up from So you have your actual existing path here and then a rebuilt path through here, but just taking its current location and lifting it up. So it's from the bird's eye view, the same exact layout. Dashed in through the hillside here is a notion that we're pretty excited about. It would be the opportunity to create an ADA accessible path from this upper elevation down to the lower elevation, which doesn't exist today, because of the stairs here and because of steep slopes on the other paths. So this would be a new path threaded through that wooded hillside, bringing you down. Oh, thank you. Parched. So in this scheme, that's optional. You could keep the path that you have, or you could go for something like this. You could do both, you could do one or the other, but we want to put that out there as a solution for access. So I know that was on some folks' minds. Back in the edge of the park, here we have the grounding basin. You'll see this in a moment in our rendering, but instead of a ramp of granite, now it's a set of tiered steps going down, still giving us access, but it's not a grounding basin that you can drag a boat up out of. Someone had the idea in the last meeting, I don't remember exactly who it was, but what if we could move that use, the actual dragging a boat out of the water, to the east end of the park and get a functional grounding basin back? Because one of the things, even today, is this is hard to get a boat to, right? If you're gonna bring your kayak to the park, you kind of gotta make your way down to it, and it's tricky. But over here, you could imagine coming in off the street, potentially launching a kayak or something, getting out of the water. So that's an ambitious idea, to put a grounding basin here on the east. It's not required, but something we wanted to show you all as a possibility.
The adding the steps, the value added of that.
I'll show some examples. I think it could be, so water would come up and down that. It would be a place for many people to kind of get down to the water's edge and touch the water. Not everybody, it wouldn't be accessible, right? But then you could also sit, you could eat lunch, you could look out at the boats. It could become this kind of waterside sort of gallery. And there are some great examples.
Yeah, but people can get down to the water now,
Right.
so that doesn't change.
And this gets back to that thing of raising the park. If we were to do that and try to keep a ramp there, it would just be so steep that this kind of says, oh, forget the ramp, let's step it, and it's different, but
Yeah, that ramp would be kind of slippery, so I think.
it's interesting. I'll show you some precedents that are pretty inspiring. So a couple,
I think one thing that, it's like access, for sure, because the wall would be quite tall,
Oh, absolutely. And I was forgotten for a moment, it's going up 11 feet.
Yeah.
That would make a huge difference.
Yeah, and
Be a water slide.
it's +4, so it's going from 7 up to 11.
Right, but still.
Mike, is this pool and weir similar to like a Damascotta Mills type of structure? I mean, this looks, I would say in the rendering, it looks like a very engineered thing.
Yeah.
And I guess when I think of that one, I think of more of a meandering natural structure. Could it be arranged in such a manner, or is there something within this functionality that requires it to be linear and?
Yeah, it's probably more similar, like Damascotta Mills or the one in Bristol.
So there's opportunity to have this look different than. It could.
In a sense, although in working through some of the considerations of the legibility of the park, some of the feedback was it would, for the legibility of the park itself, like keeping the fish passage closer to the seawall would be preferable than having it interrupt the flow of the park, for example.
I'll just springboard off of that. What you'll see in this and the next are changes to a very significant historic park. That means a lot to you all, but also means a lot to us as landscape architects and as the culture. So we've done our best in both of these to work with the consultant on the line to keep the park legible as it is today, to preserve the sense that there's a seawall, that there are open views to the water, meandering paths, that you can get near the edge of the water. Some changes that we had on the drawing board really went too far and brought too much fish passage or too much of a river-like quality through the park, and it corroded or erased the quality or the legibility of the historic park. So here, keeping the wall alignment the way we have, tucking the fish passage along the back side of that and giving it a slender cross section as much as we can is really trying to keep it so that the park, when we're done, it has some changes and some real important resilience changes, but it's still legible as Harbor Park has designed and built.
I've got two other comments. I think the
Yeah.
first one, and I'd love to get other people's opinion on this. I think your bridge of the landing, the ledge trail and the trail, I think is a distraction. And I would remove it personally from this because I think
I agree.
it doesn't, I don't think it has anything to do with the decision. I think it could be an option later on while you're looking at things, but I think it distracts from the real discussion topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other question, as far as the landscape architect goes, what do you feel the section of seawall? I kind of have this like isthmus or like peninsula of granite that is now going down, that, not that one, the one that's going from the dam that currently has yeah. It's kind of this weird structure now that's now in the middle of two bodies of water, and does it make sense to even be there? Or should it be more of a rocky edge or something where it's, I don't know, it all
Gets to that question of legibility of the park, so that's a part of a historic park, and if we don't need to take it out, which we don't in this, really, in this scheme, didn't make sense to erase that part.
Okay.
So, yeah, the utility of that wall or the, necessariness of the wall is, you're right, but, it's also part of what makes Harbor Park, so.
Okay.
So the
I
pool
think
and weir then is between the granite wall and the park?
Yeah, I think
Rather than on
as
the
we
other side.
optimize this
Okay.
design further, I think like basically the granite, not unlike what you saw in the design that Tony showed last time. Like the outside wall of the fish passage is the granite wall essentially, I think, there would be for the fish passage, there'd be a structural wall there, and it's probably treated with the granite blocks on one side. There, and, so I think in, sort of more design optimization, they become sort of one and the same, but the external view, from the landing over that way is sort of the granite wall look, not necessarily a concrete.
Yeah.
And I would just also say that, just caveat, all this sort of design and layouts and whatnot can happen very quickly. There's lots of opportunities to optimize, and so in terms of the aesthetics of this, pool and weir type fishway, our assumptions are they're more masonry finishes throughout and things like that.
Quick question.
Ray and then
It all looks very flat right there. The granite wall that we're just talking about, how much higher above the pool and weir will that be? They're not flush, right?
I think it's a question to, that wall all along is gonna be at least 11 feet, and then it's gonna be increasing in height all the way up, so, yeah, I would assume that the masonry component of that wall will be higher than the fish.
And people will probably be walking down there to look into. Even though you put up signs, they still will walk down there. To look
Well,
at what's going on.
I think it's a good point. There's, I think, there's a large, probably a larger conversation around railings and,
Yeah, that's what I was
pedestrian
curious about,
circulation.
does 11-foot wall require, like in terms of zoning, does it require?
I'm sure there's a number of things along those lines that need to be addressed.
Well, what's in my plan?
Yeah, so we should dig into the safety, a bit more. You have a tall enough wall that hurts you already out there, without a railing.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely already.
Yeah, 30 inches is the cutoff, so you're way above that. So having that historic view out to the water, is very valuable, makes the place what it is, and putting up a 42-inch railing with tight spaced, fall protection on it is gonna really change that.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it was required, if you're gonna start doing
I think
construction,
you
if
might be in
it's
a
like
gray
this into
area.
a category where that's mandatory.
I think with this waterfront, I think you're in a gray area, but we'll dig into that, whether or not you need to add it. It's not a decision I would. Yeah, it's important.
And the pool and weir can't go on the other side of the granite wall.
Yeah.
That's, you mean in the course of the river?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, I'm wondering, I mean, can some of the pools be what's coming down from the cascade of the river now? Is that just,
I think, you know, that it would be possible to put the fish passage on the other side of the wall, you know, which is somewhat similar,
to what Tony,
to what Tony-
right,
he basically has sort of the same, system, he's just moved
Right.
the whole thing out, whatever.
right. But I'm just wondering if
So-
you can't, like what Tyler was saying, have some of the pools perhaps be some of the cascade of the river after the dam.
I think in this type of, fishway and these
It
tight,
needs to be contained.
well, I think, having pretty controlled transitions from
Okay.
pool to pool and things like
Yep,
that
okay.
are important for the success of the fishway, but, certainly the system could be moved, but it would just be blocking, you know, you'd need to do something with the sluiceway, you know, the low level gate, move
Okay.
that, you know, like there's some impacts that, you know, one of the limitations in the design that Tony showed is there was actually no way to drain the impoundment to do anything. Things like that. So we kept some of that. And there would, you know, at the head of the fishway, there would need to be a gate, you know.
Okay.
And you would keep a low level gate, you know, and things like that, but,
Just what I'd ask. Thank you.
I think you would have quite a bit of ledge removal on this, right? Because that south side right now is only about 4 inches high from current ledge, so you don't.
So ledge here would be removed to create that, yeah, that's
Yeah.
one of the things we call out in the beginning, that to keep a south cascade in this scenario, when you lower the water 4 feet, you have to chisel out a course for that water to go. One alternative is to do some of that chipping further down, which would need to be studied more, but to let the water come over and then head south, lower down. So yes, you're right.
Was that a criteria that this group had last time, I
Yep.
forget, to
Yeah.
maintain the south cascade?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
the
would you have the ability to do ledge removal such that you could maintain the existing pool footprint?
So just keep chipping back into here.
Sure. I realize that you get to a point where it's more delicate because of the structures, but
Also property.
Yeah.
There are
We
property
don't have
lines
on
too.
here, which is an oversight, but there's a property line right
Yes,
about
there
here.
is.
yeah,
Yes.
So you'd only go to that,
sure.
but, yeah, once you're in there chiseling, I think that's a design
Yeah,
question, if this
or
is. the
coordination
direction-
with the property owners if they wanted to continue that or.
Yeah, if this is the direction the town wants to go, I think there's lots more design to how to sculpt that, you know, we just created a kind of slot
Yeah.
to make sure the water would head south
Sure.
and make that waterfall, but there could be much more sort of sculpted approaches.
what you're showing here is on town.
Town, I'm on the town's land here.
Yeah,
So.
Can
here-
I quickly just
Yeah.
ask, so. Okay, too many things we have. First of all, I keep thinking in the context of the presentation
Yeah,
to the public and. This discussion that we're having about that piece of the dam, do we need it or not, next to the pool and where? Maybe that's something that we can talk to people about and say, this is an option, what do you think? It'd be great to get people's feedback. Do people even consider that as part of the dam? And another thing is, I'm wondering if this slide might be too busy to present with first, and if we wanted to focus more on the Montgomery Dam, because I think in the public meeting, people care probably more about that at this point. And then maybe have another slide that just shows the bigger picture and, you know, these options for the, you know, raising the wall, et cetera. And
You mean
on,
zoom in kind of to just that?
well, zoom in at first, right, to show and talk more about Montgomery Dam. And then kind of side note, the broader sea level rise issue, because I think That, I agree, it's something we have to figure out, and maybe we can do this in the meeting that we have in a couple days.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how do we present this to the public? Do we?
Yeah, I
do we
think
wanna
if we
talk with
wanna
people,
talk
right?
about what we wanna present to the public, we should think about that for our next conversation, just so that we can get through these designs and
Totally.
focus on how you all wanna react to these designs, and then once we get there, we can figure out how we wanna present it to the public.
I would say same thing goes with that ADA ramp through the woods.
Yeah.
I think that's another one that I'd probably leave off, because I think no matter what you do anywhere else, like, you can do that right now. So I think it's one of those things that I think it's a nice conversation piece, but I think distracts from.
But is it a requirement because you've raised, in other words, you've changed the park such, is it a requirement to
It's
put
not.
in an ADA? Okay, good. Right.
These are great comments and they are on my mind as we're drawing it too. Like, when do we stop drawing? Should I just keep going up Main Street and fix the parking there too? So I think for the public, especially going to a vote, there needs to be a clear choice. So we need to dig into this.
To have, give them options, right, for them to discuss, because we wanna get feedback about what they think. We don't wanna just say, this is exactly the scenario B and what we think, because we haven't decided that yet.
Right.
So how do we present it in a way that's presenting different options and ideas and have them expand?
It's almost like an overlay, like you have
Yeah.
a basic and then you put an overlay on when you're doing the
Like several
tracing or
slides.
whatever.
But you need
Yeah.
like two, you need the left-hand side overlay and the right-hand side.
So again,
Right, you-
let's think about how we wanna do the public process in a little bit, let's focus on these designs right now.
Mike, can you remind this group why we chose 4 feet and not 5 feet and not 2 feet?
For
Sea level rise?
lowering.
No, sorry, this is for reduction of the pool height.
Oh,
Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good question. It was, it's, reducing, sort of, it's like right in the sweet spot of like halfway, between, the dam removal and the full dam reconstruction.
Okay.
So it's slightly higher than what we evaluated in the original Montgomery feasibility study. We evaluated elevation 20. So it's a little, a half foot higher, but, this was.
Doesn't it also make the one we're more feasible because the.
Yeah, every bit of reduction,
Okay.
definitely.
That's why it's not just 3 or 2.
Yeah, but-
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think we've touched on everything on this drawing. This is what it would look like from the air, so you can see the pool and weirs coming
Oh,
down,
wow.
breaking through the wall. You can zoom in, you can see the pedestrian bridge path coming down. One of the other directives from the last meeting was to get the plants off the ledge, so they're off here. We kept a few, thinking you might want some shade, but that's mostly cleared off. You can see the course of the water that's coming over the weir, falling and making its way down here. These are those sort of stepped monolithic seat walls getting you down to the water. The benches that are there today. This is all now up 4 feet higher than it is today. Today it's down at this elevation. Putting the lawn back in place. This is where the old path would meet the new, right about here. So this is rebuilt, but in kind. That's that idea of an accessible path threaded through the woods. Zooming out, as you make your way across, all of this is about 4 feet higher than it is today. Reconnect the gangway here. This is the idea of a grounding basin over here for some kayaks. The other thing that this grounding basin helps us do by breaking the wall is navigate from an 11-foot high wall back down to the existing 6-foot high wall, which
Yeah.
we can do in other ways, so it's not a must, but it kind of gave us a convenient break in the wall to step down. Because again, yeah, we have to stop designing at some point.
So is the ramp from the schooner dock really high?
Going 4 feet higher than it is today.
So getting supplies, yeah.
Let me back up actually, because it's not quite that bad. The path up here where it connects. The gangway, I haven't walked the gangway, so I don't know it probably as well as you all. The point where it hits this wall is higher than it is today.
Okay.
The point where it meets this path is actually pretty close. That's pretty close to 11 today. So, I don't know the mechanics of that gangway.
Okay.
It sounds like it'll be steeper from this part if that's articulated, but if it's,
Some of the ones on the other side of the harbor are pretty
Up and
long
down,
and steep,
yeah.
so I don't know if that's.
Yeah,
It could be, yeah, and, depending, it could be that there needs to be an alcove there, that.
right, sort of step back.
Right now, they don't really achieve anything. There's not really what I would consider like a gangway that goes to the docks. It's more like the docks go up and connect to the shore, so
Yeah.
maybe just a different structure.
Yeah, longer.
Yeah,
It's definitely a vertical that many other floating docks
Yeah.
navigate around the
Right,
coastline. So it's not impossible, but it might push the dock out a little bit.
did you have, back on that slide earlier, did you say you had more of a naturalistic portion of the waterfront?
Not really. no.
Okay, for some reason I thought we had that conversation.
We talked about,
Okay.
it would be great to do it.
Oh, okay.
But when we look at it, where it would happen is back in the park here.
Yeah.
That's where we get those level grades, so.
My first gut feel is it feels a little Fort Knoxy with an 11-foot high wall. It feels a little bit, a little imposing to the harbor.
Yeah.
And kind of feels like a.
One thing to that line, I mean, you could also, this area is relative to the historical mapping, this area is all lower in elevation. I mean, you could, we talked about, floating shorelines or natural shorelines that, are a mix of vegetation and stone. Certainly you could augment like
Soften it.
boulder
Yeah.
beach essentially along through here. It would,
Kind of bring the
But if
bottom.
you want a
Yeah.
green lawn, then you need a, right, like that's part of.
But I do think there could be ways to augment that, to soften, that verticality with things that are put on
Right.
the harbor side of the wall.
And just so I'm not deceived by this view here, the grass adjacent to the fish ladder there is a slope to that going up to the pathway?
Yeah, from here to here, side to side.
It's more like,
From
if you were to
here to
move
this
that
way.
little hand straight up. Like-
Yeah, if you were to walk this way, you're going uphill, just like you are today.
No, my question is, if you're standing back to the fish ladder,
Yeah.
looking, so
Yeah,
6
that.
to 10 feet away is a path.
Yeah.
There's a slope upward right there, just as some version.
Not really.
No?
You're standing at the fish ladder, looking at the path. The path is pretty much level.
Okay,
Past the path, like it is today, it goes up really steep in the woods here.
okay,
But this is relatively level.
interesting. Okay.
That's the way it is today. If we look at the contours, like, I guess there's a rise to it. That's what that curve represents. But this path, if you stood on this path, you're at the same elevation as if you stood on the wall right there. So
Okay.
it's kind of flat.
What does the aesthetically, or if I can't quite figure out, because I've got this elevation change, like right where the seawall is adjacent to the fish passage, because the fish passage obviously is coming through pretty close to the grade of the beach, but my seawall is 11 feet high right there
Yeah,
next to it.
the aesthetics of that,
I can't figure out if it needs to step down to that to allow for the
if
opening.
you were to walk from here, you would fall in. And then down, and break through the wall at a lower elevation. So there's a slot out of the wall that the water spills out of, and these are pools that are down low relative to the park.
So all of a sudden you're starting to expose the back of that seawall.
No, sorry. The tops, so
I got you.
these things are like
I got you.
a series of cups, and they're all set level with the ground, but they're each getting deeper and deeper and deeper inside, and that's how the water is able to make its way down.
So you almost have an 11-foot deep.
It's not 11 feet, but it's 5, 6
Okay.
in some places.
Okay.
That was on my mind too. It took a while to get my head around it, but I
We
think
have 15 minutes left in our meeting. So that's,
high construction costs, 6.2 million. This is, be me honest, but this is building the lowered dam and raising the park to 11 and the reconstruction of the wall associated with that. It does not include putting this path through the woods or a bridge down. It does not include the grounding base here.
I think, for all intents and purposes, that type of stuff along the wall is adequately covered.
We'll throw the grounding basin in for it's such a big. So what's not included here is the bridge and this boardwalk and path down and this path through the woods, but at 6.2 million, you've captured everything else. You've got 50-year cost of 1.3 million. For river resilience, we're kind of doing well. We've lowered the impoundment, so upstream high water is much lower now. For coastal resilience, we've done a lot better now. We've raised the seawall up out of the 2100 high tide. For fish passage, we're doing well. We've got a pool and weir fish passage. We no longer have just the face of a dam in the way of migration. Some precedents.
I'll just say the fishway is a really high capacity fishway, you know, as opposed to a Daniel fishway or something like that, a broad spectrum of the species that might utilize, you know, the passage as well, would be supported by this type of fishway.
Courtney, just quickly, it looks like the water's not coming over the dam in this one. Can it? I think people are gonna really care about that.
It's coming over the dam, right?
It is? I can't tell. Oh, so that white part of that water.
It's lower.
This
Okay.
white is the water.
Oh, it looks like stove in my brain. I'm
Ah,
sorry. Okay, just making sure, because I think people really care about that.
Yes, you have a waterfall there.
And I think just guess people wouldn't like the railing there because of, especially the the restaurants and things. They like that, so.
Yeah, so it may be dead in the water, because it sounds like the
Yeah.
community doesn't want to see a bridge over the top. So that you would need that if you added a bridge.
Yeah.
It's for the same reason I was saying, be careful about adding fall protection around this entire seawall. I think that'll really
Keep
change
it
the
going.
experience.
Sorry.
I'll see you now.
So I suggest we take the bridge out completely so people don't get it in their mind that that's a
Yeah, I
possibility.
agree. I mean, you could add in a slide, being like, man, we can do this, but.
Yeah.
And I think it would be good to break out the seawall stuff in this one as well, because I think it's like, all the work you did with the seawall here could really be done with the first option too. Like they're really almost,
Yep, and it is what's in that cost, so
yeah,
we're carrying.
the first one as well.
Yeah, so back to
That's the
that,
highest
seawall
cost.
is in all of them, so you're
Thank you.
paying for that in all of them,
Okay.
so you can take it out, leave it in, but the cost is relative.
Apples to apples still.
Yeah, although with yeah,
We don't want pedestrian bridges or overlooks, so forget that I mentioned that, these interpretive signage was sort of building off of that idea, but might still have a place in some of the other parts of the
I wouldn't
re-envision.
say we don't.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what the comment was is that it's kind of, busies the concept, but I think it's still cool to consider some of those ideas. I don't think it's like not on the table at all.
Yeah, and out of the last meeting, you know, our task was to look at like what else could happen
Right.
around, and so we put a lot in to sort of feed you ideas.
Right.
It's for the committee.
Yeah, and I think the
We're saying
potential for some of
baseline,
that is
yeah.
really cool, so I think it should be like.
yeah, I guess I'm just like thinking though, like, does that, so if you assume a base case for that, action option, how that implicates the fish passage? Is the lower portion, you know, as you get increasingly above elevation 7, and you know, you have water cascading down into the fish passage from overland and things like that. I'm trying, something that we don't have to sort it out tonight.
Some examples of what that tool and we're, I think you all are very familiar with these precedents, but it does, especially in these bottom images, you can see how cladding it with stone could get it to work into the existing wall. I feel like one composition. These are some of those monolithic seat wall stones that we were imagining for the grounding basin. I personally like something a little more geometric like this, or it could be something a little rougher and toothier. Really, lots of options there. Scenario C is full dam removal, right there in the name. Removes the existing dam infrastructure, does not modify the bedrock or create a constructed fishway. That was guidance from you all. We've added the caveat with the asterisk that you get in there and you remove it and the bedrock work is being done. There might be some selective tweaking just to take out barriers and make sure it works as fish passage, but this is not like previous examples you saw where there was really a built nature-like fishway being put in. This is exposing the ledge. It also adapts Harbor Park, and you'll see why. Okay, so again, this is May, average river level in May, shown here. This is mean sea level for the ocean. It also has pedestrian bridges, trails, overlooks, all that. Here, we have the ADA accessible path shown as part of the baseline because the existing path, which sits down here, goes away to allow us to open up the bedrock, open up the free-flowing river. So that requires regrading down through here to get down to that river elevation. So you can see the contours in the background. This is where the seawall is today, right here. So if you take that away and take away the earth that was put in place to build this landscape and reveal the historic ledge, reveal the historic river course, using the bedrock measurements that Mike's team did, this is where the river once flowed, right here. So the waterway comes through here. In this area, we have a mixture of bedrock and boulders that are revealed when we pull back the soil, probably some cobbling and boulders put in place just to shore it all up. Here, so much of this end of the park is changing. A way to keep some legibility of the old seawall, we were thinking was to take the seawall capstones and use them as a pathway to navigate down and get you down to the intertidal area. It requires some steps for a piece, so this chunk would get you to high tide, and then if you were able, you could go down some blockier steps to get down to the intertidal kind of elevation. So then you go back up, and by this point, you're up at 11. This pathway is up at 11 with a low wall below it. And here, this would be one where we could start thinking about a living shoreline component. We kept this panel of lawn down at 9. So instead of going 4 feet up, we went 2 feet there and said, this could be a place to experiment with transitioning away from lawn to transition toward living shoreline planting in my lifetime, to sort of set not the 2100 line in the sand, but somewhere in between. Also giving you that ability to step down to the water, softens that Fort Knox quality that you described. It also has the grounding basin. And let's go to.
So that up behind is like is a 2-foot wall?
This is
along the
2 foot
path?
wall, yeah. And there's a way to grade it, which I've done here. It's a little hard to see where this lawn would actually gently rise up. So you could just, there wouldn't be a wall here. You could walk out onto the grass from the path and then make your way down to the wall here. So this one took a lot of Photoshop skills because you can imagine there's a whole lot of park here today. So using our 3D model and the contours that Mike was able to develop for the bedrock below, this is what that waterway would look like. You would come below the buildings where the impoundment is today, there'd be a dry ledge. The water course sort of follows along.
Sorry, can you zoom in? Would it be possible?
Yeah, here we go.
Better? Yeah.
Yeah. Comes through here, curves its way out toward the water. There's some area in here isn't just rocky boulders underneath. There's a bit more ledge down there. So that would be exposed. And then this is that idea of a path falling down. I ran out of time admittedly and didn't put the steps in here, but they would be right there. This is the hillside that would be regraded to kind of connect down to this waterway. This is that new ADA accessible path that would link you up to the top. There are historic tree plantings from the Olmsted design in that hillside. Additional design would be done to really work around and preserve as many of those as possible. There's also a historic planting plan for this area, which we would recommend recreating. So trying to kind of stitch this back together to look a lot like the hillside that's there today, but now just bringing the toe of it to meet this water.
I'm having a hard time envisioning that path, that bending path. Is
Yeah.
that like?
So
what
if
does
you
that
got to
look
the,
like?
can you picture standing at the top of the stairs?
Yeah.
Now imagine you're looking down the stairs, just turn to your left like 15 degrees and the hillside extending off, that's all.
No, yeah, so not that part, the part that's down going up to that water access.
This.
Yeah, what, like, what
Yeah,
is that built
oh,
with?
so the precedents we're pulling are kind of these stone jetties,
Okay,
basically a walkway made out of granite slabs.
okay,
We would use the stone capstones from the wall that's there today, try to
Okay.
use that material. And just create kind of a flat stone walkway that would bring you down and around. And then off to the edges, you would have more, boulder conditions, so. We were really inspired by what's there today and a lot of these jetties that you find in Maine that have loose or riprap like rock and then a flat walkway. The monolithic steps down at the end could be something like this. This is on the waterfront in Burlington, Vermont. Yeah, so as a last idea, when we were thinking about a bridge, or regardless of the bridge, a notion that crossed our mind was, the sacrifice here is when you gain a river that's reconnected, you're giving up that cascade of water. And we were trying to think, I think inspired by some of the designs we saw last time, is there a way to recreate or reproduce or honor that historic line? So could we take a line somewhere like the bottom of this bridge and create like this project in Kent, Ohio, create a waterfall essentially to hearken to what's there today, but not having to dam up the whole river upstream. It's possible for sure. There's projects like this one in New York City under the Brooklyn Bridge that did that on a massive scale, created this piece of public art that was a waterfall. It's a series of big pumps, bringing the water up and it's falling. There's an artist that does these projects using, instead of a cascade, they use mist and create these cloud-like effects. But just, we were imagining, we're trying to explore ways to reconnect the river, but what could it look like to kind of recall and remember that line of the cascade? So might fall in the distraction bucket when we're talking about, some of the decisions, but also just sort of crack open a little window to like, there are things that we really love about that waterfall and they don't have to go away in every scenario. So side by side, costs, resilience, and fish connectivity. Sorry, I didn't pause on it on scenario C, but the cost for that would be 2.9. And then by removing the dam, obviously the maintenance goes down markedly in this one. So 400K over 50 years. It has the highest resilience and both river and marine. Because of the undamming, and then also the highest fish connectivity. So that's them side by side for costs, resilience, and fish connectivity.
Why is the marine different?
Marine is different in this one. We just have so much, we're kind of lower. I think the living shoreline capacity here and just less infrastructure.
Okay.
It's a good question. It could come down a little, probably. It is ultimately.
If we
It
like
has a lot of the
living
same.
shoreline idea, why can't we have living shoreline included in option B? Instead of that wall, if we're not all a fan of that.
Sure,
Maybe
yeah.
just
Any
that's our
cost
baseline.
comparisons between a living wall versus a seawall?
Nominal, yeah.
Similar.
Because we're talking about planting the
Mhm.
area with grass. So if we're planting it with adapted native shoreline plants, we're still planting it, we're still putting soil in. The height of the wall will be a little lower, so. But I think the point is, if that's something this committee really wants to see in both, let's do it,
Yeah. And those costs
Let's
for
go
me,
Rick and then back to Sarah.
So this is a overly simplistic question. I'll invite you to answer in kind, but am I right that full dam reconstruction without fish passage, there's no federal money attached, but your 6.2 million and 2.9 million for B and C, are those figures before we consider available free money from the feds?
This is your wheelhouse.
It's just the raw costs, yeah, it doesn't factor in,
Money.
grant.
So, and maybe to put a less dense, point on it here, so 6.2 million that figure might be scariest here, but it's likely that because that's taking care of fish passage, provided the grant writing does its job, that number baseline for Camden property taxpayers is probably gonna be lower.
Yeah, I would, we need to supplement, this representation with also some idea of potential grant.
Okay, just because
Yeah, I
I
think
we should
that-
be very cognizant of the fact that
Yes.
people in Camden,
Yeah.
unlike people elsewhere, maybe not, don't like higher property taxes.
Yeah, no, and that's something that we talked about doing, this is a casualty of, things coming together really fast over the last less than 4 weeks since we met last.
Got it. Thank you.
And do you think when you do that slide, you'll be able to, I realize it's hard to estimate what you can get for a grant, but from other projects that have happened similar to this, like, it'd be nice to know, would that cover
Yeah, that's
half of
one
it,
thing
or
we'll do
three
is,
quarters, or,
that's
yeah.
what we'll do is figure out
Mhm.
roughly what
Sure.
would a grant be able to cover for each of these
We
costs.
certainly can't
We have,
guarantee it.
No,
right.
Will the grant depend on what happens further upstream?
Yeah,
Or,
there's some.
in other words, if
conversations that need to
fish
be had with
passage is
NOAA and
accomplished
Or
at Montgomery,
further upstream will probably, the grant money we can get for further upstream will depend on this. That's kind of why we're focused on this right now.
right, but at this point, we have no idea of what we're planning to do upstream.
I wouldn't say no
Yeah.
idea. I'd say we have a general idea.
where
I
did,
mean, we know which ones can be removed and which ones can't be removed.
Right,
where did our Olmsted reference, what was their thought on these three options?
Yeah, we've been
She's still
meeting weekly on that.
Could I just
Time is-
interject just for a second, before we go? I actually wanted to point out the operation and the life cycle costs are the same between scenario A and B. Communication between the two of us.
At 1.3 or 1.1.
1.8, yeah. So
Okay, so we have a type of the, this would be 1.8 here.
And that includes maintenance of the fish weirs and.
yeah, so on balance, like the taller dam, there's more that goes into operating that dam and things like that. With the lower dam, but then you pick up a fishway, you got some,
Right.
so that's sort of.
So that 400,000 on C does include maintenance of fish weirs and.
So $400,000 in C is just like nominal, like vegetation maintenance, things like that, checking out. Very.
So we're at time, and I know that there's a lot of public here that would probably love to ask some questions. Are we okay if we go at least 20 minutes more and hold your questions until then? Alright, I'm not getting,
6 o'clock.
alright,
Well,
That's the end of
Good.
That's the end of the slides.
family's more
Thank you.
important. Family's more important.
One more slides. The next piece was to talk about the public meeting.
Oh, perfect.
List of an agenda for what we thought the public meeting could look like, but I think we're setting up another.
Yeah,
call.
and there's two of you that can't do Thursday and two of you that can't do Friday, but most of you can do Thursday and Friday, so. I think Rick and Ray and Courtney have to Rochambeau. So I'll figure out.
is there another day that would work for all of us next week, maybe, or
I will.
that might be?
So what time, if it were on Thursday?
I think you said no.
I like to say no
Yeah.
reflexively.
10 or 11 on Thursday, which is tomorrow, or 9 AM on Friday. I know, it's rough, I know.
Next week, let's do it next week.
And I said 9 on Friday and I already have a plan for Friday.
No, I know, yeah, I have all your data, so it's great. I will try again for a day next week, early,
Is it tomorrow
I know you're
at 10?
so we'll figure it out.
I can be available at 10, I'll probably be distracted, but
Tomorrow at 10,
yes.
Be great.
No, I'm sorry, not Friday. I'm sorry, tomorrow at 10, yes, I'm sorry. Wait a minute,
Is that everybody then, or?
All right.
No, I won't be.
Oh, okay.
sorry, I'm looking at the wrong link.
I'll be on a plane, so I think it
Ooh.
would be really not possible.
Well, I think what we could do is we could meet, however many of you can meet, we'll go over this agenda, we'll get as much as we can figured out, we'll send it out in an email to the team, and then everyone has to decide on that meeting. So no decisions will be made during the conversation, but at least we can make sure that we understand the outline and the next steps. Is that okay?
So tomorrow.
Yeah, no, I definitely would prefer to be part of decision making.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, could we find a time that next week that
Okay,
works? I
I'll
mean,
send another link in
Yeah,
future
just-
next week. I just,
So-
every time I've
anybody
tried
out.
this, then we just don't have a meeting and then I.
No, we are having,
So
we have to.
Thursday
The problem is Eamon's out.
and Friday the 11th are both
Oh, you're
off the table now?
Like,
Like tomorrow and 2 days from now are both off the table?
It sounded like it, but we don't wanna.
we want Ellen to,
I mean,
but if I didn't realize you're out next week. so
Yeah,
it's
I feel like
A problem.
Amen might be a more important piece to have than the night one of us.
Yeah,
You're all in firm.
Well, I'm not trying to devalue myself, but I'm just saying,
I know.
he has a lot of info that I cannot represent.
Yeah, I think, yeah, hammer it out this week, whether it's Thursday or Friday, like tomorrow or Friday. Let's just do it.
Tomorrow at 10.
All right, tomorrow at 10, and
I'll,
no decisions will be made.
I'll make myself available.
And maybe you and I can follow up on a phone call when
Yeah,
you are
maybe
free on
between
Friday or
flights, I
Monday,
might be-
but we can chat. Okay, perfect. And it'll be open to the public, so you guys can all watch
Where?
on Zoom.
Oh, it's on Zoom.
Yeah. I'll listen in.
That's in Zoom only, did you say?
It's gonna be Zoom only, yes. We'll post it, make sure you all have it. And you can listen in. Yeah, you should. Okay, do you want to react to these? Do you want to have a conversation? No, I'm talking to the committee for a minute.
Is it possible to get copies of some of the slides?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all been on Zoom, or on YouTube, but so we'll
We
share
can
the
get
slides with you.
Yeah.
That'd be
great.
That'd
be great.
I guess I'm saying it's already public, so we can. Do you guys want to discuss for 15 minutes and then open it up to the public, or should we just move it to the public?
I think we can move.
Let's move it to public, so we
Yeah.
have time.
Tomorrow.
Let's not,
Let
yeah.
them ask.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Send us the PDF, we
Yes.
can take a look at it, mull it over and.
While you look it up, one of the things I'd love for you to reflect on, and it would get us ready for this next conversation, is the sort of Russian doll nested quality of the decisions. So there's the dam, right? And each one of these has a different solution for the dam. And then there's the seawall, and then there's public amenities, park access, and things like that. So maybe think about your feedback in those three dolls or buckets. And then we can have a good conversation about what does the public weigh in on in the public meeting? Do we say, we're just gonna talk about the dam, somewhere in the middle? So something to think about.
I have one quick question. Is there a grant that would address sea level rise and the seawall for most of Camden? Or is that something that is not available?
I happen to know Camden has a resiliency plan kicking off for the whole harbor pretty soon, so that should dig into that, that question and sort of study all the issues. It's probably not the scope of this project.
But I'm just wondering if, let's say we go with scenario A, would the seawall, then could it be part of another grant series?
Yeah,
Question.
but again, I don't think that's just gonna be part of this.
Okay.
But yeah. I think that'll be part of our grant review of like what's fundable and what's not, and we can provide that information, but. All right, public, 15 minutes. Tell us your name and you have 2 minutes. Time.
Hi, Stephen Gold, and these are just reactions because I realize we're gonna have a long public hearing. One of my reactions, okay, scenario C, okay? I don't like that at all because it eliminates all that grassy area where so many people gather and enjoy the harbor. You know, it just eliminates that for them, pushes them way off in the corner where all they're gonna be able to look at is pretty much the windjammer dock. What I wonder about is in the scenario that goes up to 11, which is probably gonna have to happen for resiliency purposes. Is that a direct overlay, or if you're gonna go up 4 feet, don't you have to cut more into the existing woodland?
So to go up 4 feet, the impact to the woodland is pretty minimal. There's a little retaining wall there that goes up to almost 11 now, so it'd kind of be filling to that. So that wooded hillside, pretty much unimpacted by that.
My next quick reaction is, can the bridge and the walkway? The merchants are gonna go nuts, you know, they're not gonna like that. And, you know, last couple of days, summer, you look at the sidewalks at Camden. And I can imagine who's gonna be pushing who off that bridge.
You know, can I ask, another concept that has been pushed around in the past, like with that option B would be to bring an overlook to, you know, the area where the gate is right now. So not a bridge all the way across, but to bring people out, you know, onto.
Basically, if you didn't have the bridge, but you could get to this point.
Right.
That'd be cool.
Well, the other thing that I'm just curious about that is scenario B with the fish ladder. What happens with the sluiceway? Is this still a sluiceway, or is the fish ladder the sluiceway?
We would maintain the sluiceway
Okay,
as part of that.
and I guess this would allow a future plan, but where are the fish gonna go? To the Knox Mill?
They're gonna go to the Megunticook Lake. I mean,
Which
you
would
know,
involve
you wouldn't,
how many more fish ladders?
well, there's 6 sites total on the river. 7 dams and actually 7 sites, if you count a minuscule little curve, you know, 8 control structures. And then, you know, that's all within the planning, you know, within the overall, you know, initiative that folks are advancing forward.
All right, who's next?
Next,
Sure.
Ken Gross. First of all, I think it's a great idea that you've changed your bylaws so that a select board member is not chair of this group. You're supposed to be an independent voice and an independent, recommendations to the select board, and it was a poor governance pattern if a select board member was chair here. Anyway, I think you're moving in the right direction there. I have other suggestions. Where do I start? Referring to plans A, B, and C, you're calling plan A full reconstruction, and this is a novel idea to me that you're rebuilding a dam. This does not need to be rebuilt. We have just invested a Montgomery gift to restore the dam, so could you call that full dam restoration or full dam preservation rather than full dam reconstruction? I think it's misleading to call that reconstruction. And along those same lines, why isn't the cost 0? Because it already exists. I mean, it won't be 0, of course, because there's things to be done. Also, my question is, your plan seems to assert that it's an either or, it's a binary choice, either with full dam or no fish. But is it not possible to have a dam and build a fish ladder? None of your scenarios show that. So are you declaring, yes, it's an either or choice? Because that's a very different choice from building the dam and building in fish resiliency. So I'd like to see that addressed somehow. Sorry, I took notes. And also plan C, I didn't see a fish ladder on plan C. I think it's unlikely that the LYS will be able to make it from sea level up to Main Street without a fish ladder. Are you saying that is the plan, that you're going to hope the fish make it up, or is there a fish ladder in plan C? And I assume we'd like to see plans for that, and the cost associated with that fish ladder.
All right, 2 minutes.
And yes, one of my final questions is how many public sessions are you planning?
That's what we're gonna talk about tomorrow. Just
Good.
tune in.
Good, because one won't be enough.
Right.
And, if you refer to a couple of years ago, the select board hosted a similar public session, and to me, it was a disaster for a couple of reasons. The choices were limited, and they did not allow any discussion on any choice and that, except the ones that were offered. So, as a select board member, I'm looking forward to your report, but the most value that you're going to have is what you find out from the people. I think the people are the experts and have the expertise about what Camden is and what Camden needs more than any public speakers that you've had. So I look forward to your report and I do hope to take part in your session or at least attend your upcoming sessions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do
Anyone?
you want me
else?
to respond to any questions or will you do that? Will you?
Yeah.
Okay,
What?
I can go rapid fire.
Okay, why the
Yeah,
building?
so
again?
the naming of reconstruction or repair, we can refer back to and craft the nomenclature. Whatever we call it, the cost is real to fix it. If you want to just call it fixing, the cost is what we've shown here. The fish ladder was not shown in A because this committee said to not show it in A, that A is meant to be a status quo, an example of what it costs to put back what you have. So that was a real deliberate recommendation by the committee. The fish ladder not being shown in C was also a clear directive. We could certainly add one. In that case, one of the things we've suggested is not a ladder.
But no, but with C, I mean, we've been, spending, most of the last month, working on that option, running hydraulic models of it, exploring the topography from 1929 and all of that. So there is, the caveat there that there may need to be some selective adaptation, but there isn't any hiding fish ladder plan there. So the representation is that it's true to the concept in that we're exhuming, historical bathymetry and topography through there down to the historical edge, and that is the.
So you build it and cross your fingers that the fish will actually make it up, or is there a plan B?
He's an engineer that specializes in knowing whether or not fish can pass, and what he's saying is they've done a lot of research. And what they found is that you're not going to need to build engineered fish passage. If you remove that material, they're going to be able to pass from the harbor up into the river. That's what Mike is saying.
Without any pools?
And so, we've talked about this in the past couple of meetings as well. There's always a process of removing all that fill and that structure and really understanding the underlying bedrock. We've done the best we can to understand, the ledge between both exploring, doing borings, looking at the historical maps and things like that. But there is always an adaptation that occurs once that ledge, and so there would be pools, there would be runs, there would be rushes, and small cascades, but the mouth of the river operating would not be unlike what you see along many other coastal rivers all up and down the coast of Maine, that have bedrock exposures and that sea run fish ascend.
Anyone else from the public? Yes.
Hi, I'm Susan Ryder, from Mountain Street. I want to actually reiterate and support, two comments that the previous speaker said. I don't think one public meeting or hearing or whatever you call it is going to be sufficient. This is a complex topic and there's been a lot of discussion about it for a long time, but I don't think most people in Camden have been following it very closely and will be prepared to come to a technical presentation and, spend an hour talking to people and looking at some schematics and some drawings and then feel like they've got enough information. I think you're gonna need to plan for more, and I'm really sorry that it's taken this long for you to even think about it. I think you should have been thinking about this 6 months ago, because it's the other half of your charge, and I want to look at the options, but also to look at involving the public. So that's one point. The other point is that, I support what this man said over here about, looking at the rest of the river, because it's an obvious question. And, the focus entirely on the Montgomery Dam is really taking away from a discussion about what's going on along the rest of the river. And what would that look like? What would it take? How is it going to impact property owners up and down the river? And, how's the water going to flow? Those are all questions I would have, or I do have. And I think they need to be answered, or you need to prepare those answers within the next month, within the next several weeks. So good luck, because it's gonna be challenging.
Yeah, thanks. More public meetings definitely in the plan, so stay with us there. What's happening with the rest of the river? I do think the MERCAC spent a lot of time over the last year really thinking upstream, and then with this vote, we really decided like time's of the essence. We gotta go really focus on Montgomery and figure out what happens there. And as Audra mentioned earlier, what happens there will dictate what happens up the river. And I think the committee has asked those questions and is working to answer them as well. And we just can't do everything in one meeting. And so we're trying to do as much as we can. And so great questions. And I think the committee has asked them as well and working to answer them. So thank you. Yeah.
But at these public hearings, will we be able to ask that kind of question, like, but what happens upstream?
Absolutely.
Because right along, I mean, I haven't been following everything. It's like your website is amazing. It's like,
there's a lot.
But that's my big question. It's like, how can I vote or have an opinion about the dam when it's just the end point of this big process? And I really feel I need more answers.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying about we have to do one thing at a time. But I can't do that last thing in my head. I can't make that last decision without having other questions answered about, well, if I vote for scenario A, what does that mean about the Knox Mill Dam? What does it mean about all the dams up the stream? So.
Yeah, and that's a good thing that should be
Can we
within
ask that question
Yeah.
without having the answer be, we can't tell you?
No, and I think we can tell, and I think that's one thing that should be in the recommendation report is if scenario A were to occur, then this would be the outcome upstream. It would be, and I think
so
that could be a helpful thing the committee wants to answer that and has worked hard to get to that point. So.
With potential costs.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what we can do.
I mean, just for one small example, when I was looking at your website, one of the frequently asked questions is, well, if this fish ladder is successful and fish go up the river, will that mean any changes, for example, in Megunticook Lake or wherever? And the answer, to my surprise, was yes. I didn't know that, alewives eat zooplankton more than they eat phytoplankton, and so the water might turn sort of green or whatever, like, who knew?
Yeah, and so we've been having a lot of conversations with fish biologists and making sure that whatever happens, a lot of folks will be engaged, DEP, IFNW, Department of Environmental Protections in the fishery and wildlife. And so we'll make sure, I think the whole point of this is to make it a cleaner, healthier, more resilient community. So I think that's the goal of the town, that's been the goal of the grant, that's been the goal of the project partners, and that's been the goal of MERCAC. And so we will identify what those vulnerabilities are and work to find answers to them. And I think that's what we're always trying to do. So good questions. Thank you. Yes.
Bernice Berger, Cross Street, Camden. So getting back to scenario A, I really am questioning the $2.8 million that you are saying you're really sure that is what the expense would be to now we're not calling it reconstruct. I'm questioning that because monies already have been put into that part of the dam and refacing it. And what are you going to do? What's the plan? How are you going to spend that money?
Like, and the engineers.
I didn't talk through what those costs are based on, and, maybe Audrey could talk, to what, the work, that has already been done. I think it's mostly been related to, replacing the gate.
Right, I'm very familiar.
Itself, I think, talking with Dave St. Laurent, Public Works fellow. He tried to repair the weir, but it's pretty inadequate, and there's leakage and, you know, disassembly all along the weir there. So we approached this, we were tasked, you know, looking at this, you know, so that you've got a functional structure there that, you know, meets the original lines and grades for, you know, a 75-year period or something like that. And so to get to that point, there's a lot of deficiencies with that structure. And so to get to that point, there's a lot, you know, that would go into that. We talked before, so the 2.8 million is there, includes raising the seawall 4 feet. So then we came back down to 2.2 million, and I mentioned that about 40% of that was related to the seawall and the rest of it was related to the dam. But so, you know, just purely to reconstruct the dam, along the lines of what I described, you know, replacing the spillway, you know, replacing that area around the gate structure, repairing the leakage around the rest of the dam, repointing and things like that. In round numbers, I can give you the exact estimate, but in round numbers is probably 1.4 million plus or minus. But that's the context at which we developed that estimate. That's different than just saying, okay, there's an existing dam there, and you don't have to do anything to it. Obviously, that cost is zero.
And also the seawalls could possibly be improved and taken care of by the other grants that are going to be sought after. So it could be
1.4 is what it sounds like.
Yeah, we want to separate the two for sure, for people to understand.
Well, would the seawall have to even be dealt with in scenario A?
Well, that's a question if it should be dealt with now, right? And I think that we heard from the library and we heard from the community and we heard from the town that the seawall does need some support, so I would say.
But even if you're not keeping it in that figure, you're still looking at, what I understand is about 1.4 million worth of repairs. So it's not zero, but it's still a significant number.
And when we come back, one of the things the committee clearly asked us for tonight was to break those numbers down, so it was real easy to see at a glance. 1.4 for the dam, an additional 800,000 just to fix the wall, another 600,000 if you wanted to go up higher with the park. That's how we will break down the 2.8 going forward, so you can see the sort of menu. And the question for the committee, which we've talked a lot about tonight, is do we put those projects together, the seawall and dam, or keep them separate? I think voters can understand it if they're explained the costs, where the costs go. So yeah, that level of transparency is what we're going for and what the committee's asking for, so it'll all be there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
If you take a straight line from the town landing where you park.
Sorry, they're asking for your name.
Oh, I'm Jonathan, I live in downtown Canton. But if you take a string line from like where you can walk on that boardwalk where the schooners go, you take a string line to like seawall right now. What's the difference in height? Like, is one like 4 feet higher or one 4 feet lower? Like,
Help me with this schooner, is that this piece you're
like,
talking?
you know, just like they just rebuilt that nice walkway where all the boats go out right there.
Here?
Yeah, so if you take a string line from there right across to the seawall right now, is that level or is it lower?
To
or
this-
how-
I will tell you, let's go.
I'm sorry, this might not be your wheelhouse. I've been curious about like if the sea level were to go up, is the whole place where we don't park, is that gonna go underwater too, or?
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Yes, it will.
The edge of,
Where will we all park?
the edge of the park here is at about, based on these contours, at about, 10. Elevation,
Above sea level right now?
no, elevation 10 above like
A datum.
invisible datum in the world. So everything I reference goes off the same benchmark. So low tide is down like -5, something like that. 5-ish is high tide.
Yeah.
Your seawall in the park is at 6, your seawall at the landing is at 10.
Okay.
So the landing's
it's 4
higher
feet
than,
higher right now.
yeah,
Okay.
it's actually close to where we're talking about raising the park.
Okay, that makes sense.
But that's right there, based on these contours. I'd have to zoom out to tell you, I don't know the whole edge of the landing.
Yeah, and I can tell you, Jonathan, that much of the town landing is below elevation 11. So when you think about these elevations, I have seen representations of a similar exercise of taking the essentially that high tide line and raising it 3.9 feet, and quite a bit of the town landings underneath that.
Does that help?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure, yeah.
All right, we're technically out of time, but is there one last question? I just want to make sure everyone feels heard in the audience.
Interject one little thing.
Okay.
And I don't know, this is somewhat of a question. I know we're driving towards a November vote sort of idea. But what is the harm if we don't do the November vote, but we do it in June to allow for more community outreach with data? What's the harm? I don't
I
know
think
what
that
the
the
harm
thought
is.
process was that the November vote is one that has the highest turnout
Yeah.
because of it being presidential.
But will people be distracted by the president?
Well, they might be, but I mean,
Question.
just like statistically, that's gonna have the highest turnout. That's
Or-
what I think I was thinking of.
Yeah, there's pluses and minuses. Maybe we should have a discussion on that tomorrow.
Yeah, see how it
I think
goes.
we should,
Right,
yeah, because there
There
are a
isn't
few
enough
of us who had
information.
the same question.
Yeah, we're all
Just
thinking about it.
What would be lost
Yeah, like.
if we
what are-
waited, other than the voter question in terms of making the decision?
Well, there's the
And what-
environmentals involvement and money that they're using up over time. We need to know like where we are with that.
Right, but if more money is needed and we need more time, I mean, it's not an either or.
Yeah,
question,
we
it seems to
can,
me.
we can talk about this
Yeah.
and not worry about money and think about time, because at the end of the day, it's about what works for your community. So,
Short answer, the natural high turnout that we're gonna get from everybody pulling their hair out in November.
and initially, when we thought about this, there is a, a diminishing return on the conversation, right? And so you want to make sure that you engage as much as you can before you lose everyone. And so I think there's arguments to be made on both ends, and
Well, tomorrow's conversation should help begin to sort through that.
yes, I will try and get a Zoom link whenever I can, and follow up with you then. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
I move to close the meeting. Everybody in favor of closing the meeting?
Why don't you gavel? That's prerogative of the chair. Yeah.
I had to do it.
Something else, I just.
But you need a gavel.
As soon as I said gavel,
That's okay.
Fine. Phones are blowing up still. I'm like, oh, people stop. No, they don't.
It's actually about this.